Growers across America are always looking for a better return on investment. They continue to search for ways to increase yields and improve the effectiveness of fertilizers. But the real question is how? With the answers tonight are the experts with TKI Crop Vitality. They specialize in sulfur-based plant nutrition for North America's crops. Good evening and welcome to Rural America Live. I'm Janet Atkinson, and joining me now are Tom Fairweather, Director of Agronomy, Mr. Mike Troutman, an agronomist for the Pacific Northwest region, and also Patrick Giannetti. He's a product manager. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Nice to have you sit down with us this evening.
Good to be here.
Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. Well, first of all, let's start off and, of course, get to know y'all a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about TKI and, of course, what you guys bring to the table.
Sure. TKI, we're really specialists in sulfur-based liquid plant nutrition products. And we operate 11 manufacturing centers around the country. Mm-hmm. And really what sets us apart as an organization is we have a dedicated team of agronomists like Mike and Tom here, mm-hmm. and crop and soil specialists, most of whom are certified crop advisors. And each of them really bring unique insights and experience to their geography that they're in, to the crops they deal with and the unique soils. And we really bring a lot of insights to growers to help them improve the efficiency and effectiveness of their fertilizer program.
All right. Well, it's always good to also get to know folks personally. Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up on a farm in central Illinois and was going to farm with my dad, but my mom talked me into going back to school. So I went down to Carbondale, Illinois, and I was going to major in forestry, but then I switched over to agriculture and got a BS there, and then went out to Kansas State University and got my master's degree in soil fertility. Then after that, I migrated out to Oregon State University and worked for the university for about 4 or 5 years, and then eventually moved to California and worked for different companies there, and then I came on to Tessenderlo Kerley in about 1989.
Okay, covered a lot of ground, it sounds like.
Yeah, a lot of good experience.
Familiar with a good part of the country. How about yourself, Mike?
Grew up farming. Mom and Dad had an apple orchard and a wheat ranch, so I grew up doing both. So when I went to school, the only choice to go to was into agriculture, so I got an agronomy and soils degree at Washington State University. Uh-huh. And then my first job out of college was with a liquid fertilizer company. So I have been in the agricultural business, in the liquid fertilizer business for 41 years, and with Tessenderlo Kerley, 29 years.
Okay, thank you very much. And Patrick, we already asked you a little bit about the company, but how about yourself?
Sure. So I'm one of those people who didn't grow up on a farm or in agriculture, but the moment I came in contact with our company, I just fell in love with it, fell in love with crop nutrition. And in my role, I look after our products, look at the strategic direction of them, and I just actually got my certified crop advisor license, so it's something that I'm really passionate about and really fortunate to be a part of.
That's a pretty big accomplishment for a gentleman who didn't grow up on the farm.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
You've learned a lot, learning curve pretty tall.
Yes, definitely.
So as far as Crop Vitality, how long have they been supplying goods to farmers?
Well, the Tessenderlo Group, our parent company, really has been in agriculture for just about 100 years. But TKI, we've been involved in agriculture in the U.S. for 70 years. Mm-hmm. We really got our start when 4 brothers, called the Kerley brothers, uh-huh. They developed a new way to turn sulfur into liquid fertilizer. And these guys were way ahead of their time. Liquid fertilizer was just in its infancy back then, getting started. And we've been fortunate enough as a company to grow and evolve over the years, but we play really a small but important part in a grower's farming operation, their fertilizer program. And many growers might not know our products by name, but there's a good chance if they use liquid sulfur, it's probably one of our products. Mm-hmm.
Well, that brings us around. Tom, touch on that if you would. Folks may not be super familiar with the name, but products far-reaching, just as Patrick said.
Yeah, we started producing ammonium thiosulfate, thiosol we call it, back in 1959. So it's been growing ever since, and even when there was not much sulfur deficiency around, there was still a need for sulfur in various parts of the country. So it's been a product, it's been our flagship product for a number of years. And then later on we branched out to some other products.
And Mike, I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes in the industry over the years that you've been involved.
There has been a lot of changes. Everything from, especially in the liquid fertilizer business. When I first got started, there was, at least out in the West, we've always used liquid fertilizers, but that has been growing every year, just from a standpoint of being able to prescription blend what the grower might need in his field, ease of application, things like that. So, and that just continues to grow.
What other kind of trends do you see it kind of continuing to progress? I mean, we're now 2018, and just even in the last 5-10 years, there's been major changes. We've got another 5-10 years ahead of us.
I think one of the things that I've noticed out there is a need for more nutrient efficiency out there. So I remember one of my growers, or one of my dealers years ago would say, gee, Mike, when we do potatoes, we'd start out with 300 pounds of nitrogen, 300 pounds of phosphorus, 300 pounds of potassium, and then we're going to take a soil test and decide what to put on. You know, that was 40 years ago, and that's just kind of the way things were. We're not that way today. Number one, it's more expensive than it used to be back then. But number two, there's more of people want to be more sustainable out in the field. They want to do a better job with nutrition out there, put down what the crop needs to grow the yield and quality you want, but don't put on more than you need.
That does make sense. Efficiency and sustainability has certainly been a key word in agriculture here for a number of years now. Tom, any follow-up to that?
Yeah, I think that's where it's going. It's efficiency and doing the right thing for the environment. So everybody's got to be in tune to that. They got to do their homework. They got to know what that crop is going to take. And so it's the 4 R's all over again, you know, the right place, the right time, the right amount, the right product.
Now, you guys mentioned sulfur, and we're going to talk a lot about sulfur tonight. Do you feel like sulfur is gaining momentum as far as use on the farm?
Definitely. Where I live in the state of Washington, Kennewick, Washington, actually, west of the Rocky Mountains, we've been using sulfur for 40 years or more. It's just kind of been a standard thing. But you get east of the Rocky Mountains, and it wasn't quite so much. And that business is growing. And so it's not a mature market. It is. It's still a growing market.
Okay. How about yourself? Your footprint has been along the West Coast, but you're in the Midwest now.
Yeah, when I was growing up, we weren't talking about sulfur deficiency in Illinois, but now we are, because we see a lot more of it today. And about 10 to 15 years ago, we started seeing signs of it, you know, early in the spring, where you see the plants aren't picking up the sulfur as much. You've changed over from conventional tillage to minimum tillage, and that left a lot of that crop residue on the soil surface, and it wasn't breaking down very fast and releasing that sulfur that was in the crop residue. So we started seeing early in the spring when we started what we thought was sulfur deficiency, and it was coming out of it as the season went on, but now it's progressively getting worse.
What is a sign of sulfur deficiency?
It's a yellowing of the leaves, kind of like nitrogen. It's kind of hard to tell early in the season because they look the same on a small plant.
Okay.
But you know, you've got to know what you put down and know what's going on, take a tissue sample and confirm it.
And you can take a tissue sample just pretty much as soon as you see the yellowing of the leaves to kind of determine that?
Well, it's kind of hard for, you know, but you have to do a comparative study. You know, sample the area that's maybe deficient, what you think is deficient, and compare it to another area that you know is not deficient.
Now, of course, I'm a Midwestern girl myself. I haven't spent a lot of times around a lot of the crops that are grown on the West Coast. How do some of the Western-grown crops, how do they respond to sulfur deficiency?
We have in the West, we normally have higher pH soils. Sulfur is just something that's necessary there. Plus, you know, we never had the manufacturing either, like they had in Michigan and that with the different plants and that. So that actually put a lot of sulfur into the air. So when it would get rain or something like that, you would end up fertilizing with sulfur, kind of free product. We didn't have that back out in the West. So everything that we had to do, we had to put down in order to get the response out of the nitrogen we were looking for. So with our high pH soils, our arid conditions, really set up nice for the sulfur chemistry.
Now, when you have the chance to talk to farmers in the Midwest, since it's still kind of something that's getting some ground and gaining some momentum, do you ever have farmers think, what? And ask you for more details on this?
There's been a lot of information out in the last 10, 15 years about this. It's been showing up. Iowa's done a lot of research, Illinois, Indiana. So growers who are paying attention and looking at reading the magazine articles and stuff and keeping up on things are pretty much aware of what's going on, but they always think that it's maybe not happening in their spot or their farm. But we see a lot more, so I think people have to be aware and do their homework.
Well, it's certainly something that you talk with a lot of growers about, and you were talking about how exciting the company is and what you're bringing to the table. Tell me about your experience and what you see in the future here as we move forward.
Well, really another thing to keep in mind, in addition to what Mike and Tom are talking about, is the new hybrid variety of seed that's out there. They really have a high yield potential. And the higher those crops are yielding, the more nutrients they're removing. So secondary nutrients and even micronutrients. So those nutrients are getting more attention today, like sulfur. So those are things we have to be mindful of to really unlock the yield potential that's there for these new hybrid seed varieties.
And everything's kind of coming together. And you and I had the chance to sit down earlier during the Market Day report and talking about the diet for the plant. And this is just sort of helping to bring the chemistries together.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really you want to, as Tom was talking about earlier, you really want to have the right mix of nutrients available to that crop throughout the season. And like I said, the high yielding varieties, they have a high demand throughout the season. And the liquid form of our products, they're very soluble and they're very available in the soil. And they also help to unlock other nutrients that are there that are maybe tied up in the soil. So we really see a good fit there. Our products not only perform well as standalone nutrients in addressing nutrient deficiencies, but they work well in blends and make those other nutrients more effective.
And that brings me back around to revisit something that we talked about just a little bit earlier, in that folks may not be too familiar with your name, but they're definitely familiar with your products because of those blends and where they basically a large footprint across the country in these blends.
Yeah, we mainly sell to dealers, so we don't get a lot of contact with a lot of growers. So they are familiar with the name of our products, but not our name. They know what thiosol is, a lot of them do, and KTS and CATS, but Tessenderlo Kerley, you talk to them and they say, huh?
Yeah.
They really don't know, but we've been around for almost 70 years now.
Just a little time.
Yeah.
Just a little time. And Mike, you had a similar story about that earlier, yeah?
Well, what's interesting is that when I do grower meetings for some of our dealer customers, I'll get up there and they'll say, it's Mike Troutman with Tessenderlo Kerley, and everybody's just kind of like, it's like, I said, how many of you heard of Tessenderlo Kerley before? Raise your hands, and nobody raises their hands. But if I say, do you use a liquid sulfur out there or something like thiosol, just about everybody will raise their hand. So it really is, again, we don't have that name recognition out with the growers, but probably most all the growers have used our products at one time or another.
That's great. Well, we're setting out to change that. They're going to recognize tonight.
There you go.
There we go. Well, of course, we are going to take calls tonight. So if you have some questions for our guests, of course, we'd love to hear from you. So again, opening the phone lines, that number is 877-731-6733. That's 877-731-6733. Call in with your questions tonight. And of course, we'll be right back in just a moment on Rural America Live. Well, welcome back to Rural America Live. I'm Janet Atkinson, and our phone lines are open. The number to call to ask an expert a question and live on the air is 877-731-6733. That's 877-731-6733. Again, join the conversation. We would love to hear from you. Now, we've been talking to Crop Vitality. Here with me is Tom Fairweather, Director of Agronomy, Mike Troutman, an agronomist for the Pacific Northwest region, and also Patrick Giannetti joining us. He is a product manager. Again, the number to call to speak with our experts on air, 877-731-6733, 877-731-6733. Now, you would think I say that number a lot of times and I'd remember, but it does not happen that way. So I have to say it several times, of course. Now, the agriculture industry, of course, is a large one. There's a large footprint across the industry. There's a lot of fertilizer options available. One of the first questions I want to ask as we get this round started, what sets you guys apart?
What I always try to communicate with both our customer base and anytime I get a chance to visit with growers is that when you put a fertilizer down, say you need potassium or you need calcium or something like that, you have a lot of choices. You want the potassium or you want the calcium, but there's something that's going to come along with that, because all fertilizers are salts. So it could have a chloride attached to it, it could have a nitrate attached to it, it could have a sulfate attached to it. So you might be putting down the potassium, but something else is going to come with it. And that can either be a positive thing or it can be something detrimental, depending on the crop that you're talking about. What really sets crop vitality products apart is that if we're going to deliver a potassium to you or a calcium, we're going to what comes along with that is a thiosulfate. And so there is advantages. It's not just sulfur, but it's the chemistry of a thiosulfate that you get extra advantages from that, say, even a product with just sulfate sulfur you wouldn't get.
Tom, you have something to follow that up with?
Well, the difference between sulfate and thiosulfate is the sulfate sulfur has one sulfur with 4 oxygens around it. Thiosulfate has a central sulfur with another sulfur, a second sulfur attached, and 3 oxygens. So that kind of a combination gives it an S2O3 formula, but it also is a kind of a, what do we call it, a polar molecule where it attracts water. So that gives it a lot of solubility. That's why we have a 12-00-26% sulfur in liquid form.
It sounds like all sulfurs are not created equal.
No.
And it all depends on what you bring together in one, I guess, one serving, so to speak.
Yep.
Correct.
All right. Well, we've got the phone lines open, and we do have a caller, so get ready, guys. You're going to be on the hot seat here.
Okay.
Now we have Rob from Minnesota on the phone with us. Rob, go ahead with your question or your comment.
Yeah, my question is, how can your product help us in Minnesota grow better canola and alfalfa? Right now, we use a lot of granulated sulfur, and we get mixed results, obviously, depending upon when we apply it. So how's the thiosulfate product? How can that improve our yields?
Well, canola takes a lot of sulfur, as you know, so it combines with, we can mix it with UN32. It just depends on how much you're putting down for per acre and the timing, I guess. But the plant is going to require, 20 to 30 pounds at least sulfur per acre. So if you're looking at situations where you're not getting that response, I'm not sure what time what form you're putting down as far as a dry fertilizer. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's just pure granulated sulfur. That's what they recommended years ago, and then most people are still using that. And it sounds like
elemental sulfur?
It's not mineralizing the soil effectively, obviously temperature dependent.
Is it elemental sulfur?
Elemental sulfur, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it takes a little while for that elemental sulfur to oxidize in the soil. The plants take up sulfate sulfur. So when you put elemental sulfur down, it's got to break down, and then it's got to oxidize to sulfate sulfur. And by doing that, it takes a little time. It can take, depending on the size of the sulfur particles, it can take from anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks to 2 or 3 months. In California, I used to see soil sulfur, what they called, particles laying on the soil surface for months at a time. It never did break down. So what you want is a soluble form of sulfur, like a thiosulfate or sulfate sulfur. But in the thiosulfate, it will oxidize within a couple of weeks to sulfate, and plants can take it up. So it's a much more faster reacting nutrient in the soil.
And Rob, there's also one other thing too. When you have the oxidation of that thiosulfate in the soil, you get some additional benefits. So depending on the pH of your ground, it can help make your phosphate actually a little more available. It can help release certain micronutrients into the soil that's already in the soil, but they're not available in plant form. So the oxidation of the thiosulfate can give you some iron, maybe some manganese. And also, if you got free lime in the soil, it can help solubilize calcium and release other nutrients. So the thiosulfate, the granular sulfur you're using will do the same thing. It's just going to do it really slow. With the thiosulfates, to Tom's point, it'll happen relatively quickly.
Thank you for your question. Again, that was Rob from Minnesota with that question, which his timing is actually perfect because my next question was going to focus on the liquid side. He said that he's using granulated. Talk a little bit about how liquid is now being incorporated more so in the advantages.
I think over the last 50, 60 years, liquid sulfur or liquid fertilizers have been gaining more and more market share because of the ease of handling. And you have products like UN32 and 1034O and thiosol, which is very soluble. So these can all blend together, so you can come up with about any type of blend you want. You can change that blend pretty easily. You know, you're not stuck with one thing that you got to go out to the field with. So it lends itself to ease of handling and getting the right nutrient in the right proportion.
And what about as far as on the East Coast? You guys have been, there's been a lot of liquid applied as far as the Western growers. I said East Coast, but I meant West.
Right. I was figuring you did. I didn't want to take a job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Nothing new to them.
Yeah. With the multitude of crops we grow on the West Coast, I think even in Washington, one of the latest commercials I heard that we grow over 300 crops in Washington.
Wow.
So there'll be anything from dryland crops where we will shank fertilizer in, so it's liquids work real well that way, to irrigated crops, and we'll put it through drip, micro drip sprinklers. You can put it through center pivot irrigation. So the liquids really lend themselves to being able to put the right nutrients on at the right time, but very conveniently.
You've got to have an example of this, and some of the growers that you guys have interacted with that have been able to bring some examples and stories to the table.
I can think of a lot of stories, but
not ones you're
actually,
allowed to tell.
well, no, we were. Back when I used to cover Colorado, Nebraska for Tessenderlo Kerley, we wanted to develop some data with our liquid potassium or potassium thiosulfate, KTS. And they were using a dry potassium at the time. They just dissolve in water and that. So the dealer, crop consultant, took me out to visit with this grower, and he was a high-tech grower. He had GPS equipment on. He had, I don't know how many gallons of product he could carry on his tractor. He had a variable rate planter. He was using an NPKS blend with micronutrients, so he was doing everything right. And I went out and talked to him about KTS. And after I got done telling him about KTS and the thiosulfates and how everything worked, he looked at me and he said, "You're telling me that I can change a potassium source and do better?" And I said, "I think we can." He said, "I'll tell you what, I'm tired of doing free test plots for everybody." So he said, "If you decrease my yields, you have to pay me for what it costs because you decrease my yields." I said, "Okay," but he says, "I'm a fair man." He said, if it does a better job, I'll pay you the increase." I said, "That's perfect," you know. So anyway, him and the dealer we had, they put out the trials. We had 8 replications across his fields. He had his yield maps. He had everything done. And when it all came out, our average yield increase was 25 bushels to the acre.
Wow.
And he just had a kind of a fit, like, that can't be possibly true. You got the better parts of the field. And I'm thinking, if I did, it'll be the first time in all my years of research I got the good parts of the field. But anyway, so he went back through, kind of readjusted everything, and finally said, hey, it was 13 bushel better. So the nice thing is we got a grower started on the program. That's been almost 15 years ago. I'm still waiting for my check. That didn't come. But it's really fun to be able to do those kind of things with the growers out there that are willing to take a look at things, and then we can show them a good return on investment. That's really all we want to do, is another tool in the toolbox. Take a good program that he had and tweak it, make it just a little bit better.
Success together, it sounds like, very much. Now, do you guys have a story that can compare to that? That's a pretty good story.
No, that's a pretty good story.
That is. I can't match that.
Well, so far you're winning the story battle.
Yeah, I got tons of stories, though.
Well, that's always good news. Now, as we continue to move forward, of course, there's a lot of challenges on the market right now, or in agriculture as a whole, and a lot of things in headlines. What about as far as nutrient management topics? What do you see maybe on the forefront as we move forward and grabbing headlines and focus?
Well, I think the main headlines for the last 10, 15 years has been the nitrogen and the phosphates and running down the river into the Gulf and Lake Erie. So that's going to be something that we've been focusing on with our products and how to apply our products with nitrogen and phosphorus. You know, we've been promoting side dress and soil injection type of applications to reduce the surface runoff. And so things like that, and we're going to have to concentrate more on nitrification inhibition. Thiosulfates do inhibit nitrification, but it's the way you use them. If you spray it on the soil surface, they're not going to inhibit inhibit very much. But if you soil inject into a small retention zone and you do it at the right rate, you can get a fairly good inhibition of that nitrogen. So we're playing around with that and looking at that and seeing if we can improve that. The sulfur requirements of some of these crops now that Mike mentioned earlier, we're looking at higher rates on corn. It used to be 10 pounds to the acre now. In Nebraska, we're looking at 20 pounds to the acre application, sometimes a little bit higher. When you get up around 240, 250 bushel corn, it requires just a little bit more nutrition there. And so when you do that and you put that in the same retention zone with that nitrogen, you can get a better response in that nitrification inhibition.
Comes back to that sustainability and efficiency we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
And we're always trying to keep more of the nutrient on the grower's field because he's paying for that. So if we're going to lose it through volatilization in the case of nitrogen or leaching, he's not going to get very good bang for his dollar for the fertilizer. So again, part of the chemistry that we have will help utilize that nitrogen more efficiently. We have a liquid slow release nitrogen. It's just a urea-based nitrogen, but it's complex in the resin, and it's slower to release. So you can actually put that in the West anyway. We will use it in soil injection with 32 solution. And in that slow release form, it won't leach. So it keeps more nutrient in that root zone longer. And so it doesn't leach, it stays there. So when it does release, the crop's able to pick it up.
Now, of course, we've got the phone lines open. I want to hit on the phone line one more time. We are taking calls this evening. If you have a question for our guest, 877-731-6733 is the number to call. That's 877-731-6733. Inquire with our gentleman and see if maybe they might be able to help you out on your operation and have a successful 2018 growing season. Now, you had a thought that you were following up there with, Tom, I think.
I was just going to add to what Mike was saying. We did a lot of research work in California with the University of California, looking at our Ensure with UAN products on lettuce. And we found out that it performed just as well as a lot of the other nitrification inhibitors, stabilizers, whatever you want to call them. So that's something that we expanded on in other research and other crops. And so it's looking good. Mike has been doing some work on potatoes in the Northwest with it and had some good results. So it's something that we kind of started looking at about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. But it's looking like it's a very positive effect, and we can reduce our nitrogen rate just a little bit.
You know, we don't get to talk about potatoes too often as far as folks being on the Rural America Live. Talk about the experience with the crops.
Which one?
The potatoes in the Northwest,
potatoes. Eat potatoes. The Washington and the Northwest people will love you for it. So it was really interesting. One of my, he's a good friend, but also a customer, and probably one of the best potato fieldmen in the state of Washington. Anyway, we were having lunch a couple of years ago, and it was really hot in Washington that year. It started off hot and stayed hot. Yeah. We have light sandy soils where the water was going all the time, and he says, I'm having a hard time keeping our petiole nitrogen levels up. I'm putting on 40, 50, 60 pounds a week. We can't keep the nitrogen up in the petioles. And I happen to have some research work from California. It was on onions, and it was Ensure and UAN 32 solution put through the drip on onions. And I showed him the data, and I said, this isn't center pivot and potatoes, but I said, what we're doing here, it was a trial that showed straight 32 for the season, maybe yielded 50 tons of onions. And then with increasing amounts of Ensure into that, with that 32, we got increasing yield results, never putting on any more than 180 pounds of N. So what that showed was that we were able to keep more nitrogen in the root zone, lose less to the environment, and so we got a higher yield increase. So I showed him that data, and he goes, I'll show it to the grower. I said, we might want to try something like that. So they did go out, we tried it. We made a mix of 75% UAN solution, 25% of the nitrogen as Ensure, and he used that through the center pivot throughout the rest of the season. He was able to get his petiole levels up, and they stayed up. And the other neat thing that happened was that he said, you know, Mike, in the end, now, we don't know how much less a person could use in nitrogen, but in his particular case, he said, depending on the field, we used anywhere from 100 to 125 less pounds of nitrogen to the acre. And again, it's nothing magic about it. It's just that we're keeping more nitrogen in that root zone, losing less of the environment, so we have more available for plant growth and yield and quality.
It comes back to sustainability and, of course, efficiency and getting getting more bang for your buck as well.
Right.
Now, of course, also we've got to ask as far as knowing, how do I know that the chemistry is going to work on my farm? Do I know?
Well, that's a good question. You never know if it's going to, if everything's going to work. I've seen nitrogen not work.
Yeah.
But if they do their homework and apply it at the right time, just split applications helps. But sulfur's been around. This product's been around for 70 years, and so it's been proven. We've done a lot of research work over the years with universities, and a lot of our own research and with private individuals. So we know it works. If we put it down there at the right time, the right rate, we know we're going to get that response if that's what that crop needs.
And to follow up with what Tom's saying too, is that when growers put on a fungicide or an insecticide or herbicide, a little while later you go out there and there's dead bugs, dead weeds, and you know it worked. Fertility's not that way. It's you have to almost go out and measure the yield. You can't see a 10 or 15 bushel yield increase in wheat, but you can measure it with the combine. So to Tom's point, nutrition is just different that way. You have to be able to measure those yields or see something valuable in the quality.
Very much so. Good suggestion. And again, we've got the phone lines open. If you have a question for our guests, give us a call, 877-731-6733. That's 877-731-6733. And we do have a caller right now. We have John from Illinois on the line. John, why don't you go ahead with your question or comment?
My question is, you've been talking about sulfur, and my soil test came back that I'm kind of low on boron, zinc, and copper. And I was just wondering if you have the products to put in with the pre-plant liquid fertilizer and chemicals in the spring of the year.
Well, we don't have a boron product, and we don't have a zinc product today. I think we've looked down at those type of nutrients. But your dealer, or whoever you get your fertilizer from, should probably have a product that fits your needs. You just have to contact them and find out what they have. And so, but right now, I'd have to say we're probably not have anything like the boron that you were talking about.
Were you asking more also along the lines of adding that into an in-furrow or starter type of planter band, if that would work with some of our products?
Well, it would be in spraying herbicide pre-plant through the sprayer.
Oh, okay. Do you put micronutrients down through the sprayer?
32% nitrogen we do.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, our products, some of our products would work with that, and of course, as Tom said, with blends with the micronutrients that you're interested in. So it would mostly be just a matter of the herbicides that you were using and the compatibility of our products with it.
Okay.
Well, thank you for the call, John. We certainly appreciate you taking the time. That's John from Illinois with a question for us this evening. On that note, we're talking about, checking with your local dealer. What about where can we find the local dealer? How do we track them down?
Sure. So as we shared before, we have plants really all around the country.
Yeah.
And so our products are really available. Anytime a grower wants to get to them, he can contact his local fertilizer dealer. Most of our products are sold at most dealers. Ask for them by name for crop vitality products, and the fertilizer dealer can get those products to him.
And then as far as that goes, we're also getting ready to turn the calendar into spring, and spring planting season is a busy time. What about availability as we get ready to head into this planting season?
Sure. Like I just shared, we work through fertilizer dealers who carry our products, and if they need help locating a dealer, they can reach us on our website, www.cropvitality.com, or they can call us on our 800 number, 800-525-2803. And we'll be happy to connect them to a local dealer who will help guide them through our products. And also we have agronomists in pretty much every region of the country who are willing to help guide growers and direct them to the right dealer to find our products as well.
And earlier we also talked about soil tests, and soil tests we know that farmers have to do, and it's definitely required as far as making sure that your soil's up to par where you need it to be. But you also touched on the fact of a tissue test earlier.
Yeah, the soil test for sulfur has not been too accurate. So and that's why it's taken a long time to kind of recognize that there is some sulfur deficiency out there. So the next best thing is to take a tissue analysis. And so that'll tell you what's in the plant. So at a certain time of the year, then in a certain part of the plant, you can take that leaf tissue, at least on corn and beans, and turn it into the your local lab, and they'll run an analysis on it and see where that's at. And then the soil, then your histories. You got to look at what you put down on that soil. If you put manure down and stuff like that, then you might have plenty of sulfur. But if you haven't been putting anything manure down or any other form of sulfur, today it's worth maybe taking a closer look at and making sure that you're not running short. So it just depends on doing your homework, basically what it depends on.
Always homework.
Yeah.
Never ending. Now, again, we're taking calls, 877-731-6733. That's 877-731-6733. We're talking with a gentleman from Crop Vitality. And one of the things, you mentioned corn and soybeans. We talked a bit about some of the crops on the West Coast. But your products are available for a very wide variety of crops. Kind of give us sort of a scope of what we're looking at here.
Well,
can you remember them all?
Starting from the West Coast, everything in California, we use drip irrigation. It's been a big part of that process out there. There's a lot of drip irrigation these days, and so they use our products in that. They can run it through drip tape, sprinklers, so it doesn't matter. So you're covering a lot of crops just in California and in Mike's area in the Northwest.
You mentioned potatoes, orchards, also the almond crop.
We don't have any almonds except at the local store in a 5-pound bag, but it comes from California.
Right.
But we do use it on a multitude of crops, and something that we touched upon a little bit earlier that I wanted to make sure we could talk about. We're doing some research work in the dryland wheat area up in Washington, the Palouse country, which is really high yielding wheat ground, and they've been using nitrogen and sulfur for years. And now all of a sudden we're seeing the need, maybe some magnesium. They're seeing that, God, we can get some magnesium, but we're short of that, or we're short on potassium now. They've never had to do that before, but as we're talking with growers there, it's like they've almost doubled their yields. I think they've over doubled their yields in 20 years. Wow. So if you had a wheat field going 70, 80 bushels, it's going to use a lot less nutrients or different, you don't need as many or as balanced nutrition that way as now when they're pulling off 120, 130 bushel. So again, soil tests are part of it, leaf tissue is part of it, but just looking at how our yields have increased. Growers always say, geez, if I use some of yours and I use a little of yours and a little of your nutrient, I should be producing 300 bushel to the acre. And it's always kind of funny, but it really does boil down to this isn't your grandfather's field anymore. We've taken a lot of nutrients out of it. We've not always put as many nutrients back in as we should, and our yields are higher. So that's one thing that we just need to look at is to look at the full realm and full amount of nutrients available for those growers. And they'll be doing more things 10 years from now than they're even doing today.
Absolutely. And a lot of that, of course, stems from research. And I want to talk about that here in just a minute. But let's go back to the phone lines. Again, our phone lines are open. If you happen to have a question for our guests, 877-731-6733. That's 877-731-6733. And with that, we return to the phone lines and we have Mike from Colorado on the line. Mike, go ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, Mike, I was going to ask you, we've been buying KTS for quite a while, and could you explain when you make a blend with UAN and KTS, like a 26033, why we're getting better results out of that than using soluble potash?
I think it's a couple of things that we talked about maybe a little earlier, and that's a great question. Again, when we're putting potash down or potassium, we're putting it down for the potassium, but there's always something again that comes along with that. Now, actually, monocots like corn, they like chloride, so that's not a bad choice. But the value that we were getting out of the thiosulfate was again not only the sulfur component, but the oxidation of that sulfur in that band, especially if you're putting it down in your planter band. You were able to keep your phosphate available available longer for that crop to take up. Again, you get the sulfur with it. You have some micronutrients that become available that are more that can be added to that yield. And oftentimes it doesn't take as much potassium as maybe what you were putting down in the past because of the solubility of the KTS and how available it is.
All right, thanks for the call, Mike. Again, that was Mike from Colorado. So now we head up to your neck of the woods that we were talking about earlier. We have Wesley from Oregon on the line with us. Wesley, go ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, I'm just going to say we just bought some property out in Christmas Valley, Oregon, and we were wondering what kind of nutrients and nitrates we want to put in our soil. It's mainly sandy. It's not so much alkali.
Well, sandy soils don't retain very many nutrients or don't have the capacity to retain a lot of nutrients. So you're looking at probably, NP and K, but you got to take a soil test and confirm that. And so that would be the place to start. Otherwise, we're just guessing and we'll be talking here forever. But start with taking some soil tests out there and then call your local dealership or university extension agent and try to work out something with them to give you an idea of what you're going to need.
Do you have alfalfa up there?
Yes.
Yeah, and that higher pH ground?
Yes.
Yeah, because we've done a little bit of work in that area and actually have done some meetings in that area with the growers in the Christmas Valley on that. And one of the things that we saw that we needed there were probably two things. Potassium was pretty important, especially on the alfalfa. A 10-ton alfalfa crop needs about 500 pounds of potassium. It actually needs about 50 pounds of sulfur. So KTS would be a good fit through your center pivot on your alfalfa there, and also even the calcium thiosulfate. If you've got some water penetration problems, putting that in through the center pivot can pay some pretty big dividends also.
All right. Well, Wesley, thank you for your call this evening. Again, Wesley from Oregon with a question for us. So with that, we're going to talk research, but we're going to do that here in just a minute. Let these guys take just a moment here. We're going to take a short break. Our phone lines are open, though. We'd love to hear from you. Give us a call, 877-731-6733. That's 877-731-6733. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Rural America Live. I'm Janet Adkison. Our phone lines are open, and the number to call to ask an expert a question live on the air is 877-731-6733. That's 877-731-6733. Now, again, join the conversation. We would love to hear from you. We've been talking to Crop Vitality, and here with me is Tom Fairweather, also Director of Agronomy, Mike Troutman, who's an agronomist with the Pacific Northwest region, and Patrick Giannetti. He is a product manager. And of course, we've been talking about quite a wide variety of things here. And as I mentioned before the break, we're going to talk about research. And there's a new research. Well, you guys have some bragging to do, honestly.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it bragging, but as a company, we take research very seriously. Yeah. And it's something that I'm honestly very proud of. That our agronomists really make sure that our products are very well vetted. That we do due diligence on them to make sure they perform on a wide variety of crops and in a wide variety of soils. And looking ahead as a company, research is so important to us that we've recently opened a new research farm in the Central Valley of California. It's a 107 acre farm, and there's a wide variety of crops there of both permanent crops, things like tree nuts, things like peaches. There's also room for annual crops like corn and soybeans, where we do research there as well. And it's a facility that we call the Learning Center because we want to invite our customers there to come and learn with us. We want to invite growers there to come and learn with us as well. And it's a facility where we have really big plans for the future with.
I would imagine so, and this is pretty kind of fresh off the press, so to speak.
Sure, yeah. It's just been what, a few years we've been there now.
Well, about a year and a half, I think we've had a this last year, 2017, I think it was our first full year that we had there at the farm.
Talk about some of the research that's taking place there.
We're looking at, of course, sulfur research, but in that part of the world, there's a lot of drip irrigation. So we're looking at doing work with drip irrigation with our CATS products, water infiltration type of trials. And then, of course, potassium with KTS and K-Row. K-Row is one of the only products out there that we recommend on soybeans for in a starter type of application, like an in-furrow application. Usually, you wouldn't recommend anything with soybean because it's so sensitive to salts. But with K-Row, we can get by with that. We've gone up to 4 gallons, or we recommend up to 4 gallons in furrow with that. So we've done a lot of work with, like I said, several different universities, and we fine-tuned it over the years. So we put that on our application guide, so we feel confident that that it works, and you can apply or get some early season sulfur when you plant your soybeans.
All right.
So some of the other research is a lot of nitrogen use efficiency we'll be looking at, and some more work on thiosulfates and nitrification inhibitors, how to enhance that.
Okay, sounds like good research.
One of the neat things too about the farm, I recently talked to one of our customers up in Washington, and it's a company that has they do a lot of their own research also, and they've done some third-party research for us as we've developed different nutrient regimes in the dryland wheat area per se. And I recently talked to them about, said, you know, if since we're in California with this research farm and we can do some research for you, just if there's some things that they would like to know ahead of time, we could actually take a look at it before they would get it applied up in the Northwest. So kind of also a way to work with our customer and help them.
Learn together too.
Yes, exactly.
Very interesting. Well, with that, let's go back to the phone lines. Again, the phones are open. Give us a call, 877-731-6733. That's 877-731-6733. And with that, we head to the Husker State, and we have Larry on the line with a question. Larry, why don't you go ahead with your question or comment?
Yes, you made the statement that diasol stabilizes and when you side dress. Does it do as well when you broadcast it over the top? Or will a stabilizing nitrogen do better when you broadcast nitrogen on the top?
I had a little trouble hearing that, Larry, but the thiosulfates, when you broadcast them over the surface with the nitrogen, they oxidize fairly rapidly, so you don't get that inhibition of the nitrification as well. But when you inject it in the soil in that small retention zone with the nitrogen in close contact with it, then you get a little bit better inhibition. And so if we're looking at higher rates, because we're looking at higher crop production, so higher rates of sulfur, and we're seeing better inhibition at these higher rates of application in the retention zone. Does that answer your question?
Well, my other part of my question is, will a nitrogen stabilizer do better on the surface than diasol?
Yeah, I would say one of the ones out there in BPT would work better. DCD would work. They're proven. They've been around for a long time as well. They're good products. The thiosulfates are basically they're a sulfur-based fertilizer first, and that's why you apply them. But we found out through the research that if you apply them in a certain type of application, you get the nitrification inhibition. So you take that and add a nitrogen stabilizer to that, then you got the best of both worlds.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, Larry, thank you for the call. Again, that was Larry from the Husker State with a question for us. If you have a question, give us a call yourself, 877-731-6733. That's 877-731-6733. Now, I'm curious, as you guys go out and you visit with some of the farmers across the country, what are some of the questions that are pretty common for them to inquire with you about?
You know, just first of all, price, but we don't talk about that. So,
that makes sense.
We leave that up to the dealer.
Right.
But just sulfur nutrition and the properties of our products. The thiosulfate chemistry, the ease of handling, and that sort of thing. The type of blends you can make and where you can use them. So a lot of people, we started with KTS in California, and that's where we cut our teeth with it on drip irrigation. And then it kind of expanded to the starter fertilizer market in the Midwest. And then it kind of expanded further to foliar applications on cotton and soybeans. And then through, Mike did a lot of work through sprinkler irrigations in Nebraska. So these things are expanding out, and people get to know these products a little bit better, that they know it's good chemistry, and used in the right way, in the right situation, they work fine.
Well, we're starting to wind things down here, so I don't want to run away too much, because I want to give you a chance to also talk about something that you might want to kind of wrap things up with. Any last thoughts?
I guess my real passion is, again, understanding the nutrient that you're putting down, and that there's something that's going to come along with the potassium or the calcium that you want. And again, it can be a benefit to you, or it can be a detriment depending on the crop that you're growing. And so again, my passion is the chemistry of the thiosulfates, how well they work, and the things that they do other than just provide sulfur to the crop. So if that's one of the things I could get through to the growers tonight listening, that's the one thing I would want to send them home with.
A well-rounded diet for the plants.
Yes.
Yes.
I have one other thing. We talked about thiosulfates, but our new product, or our newest product, KRO 23, is a potassium sulfite.
Okay.
It's an SO3. It's a different chemistry, and because of that chemistry, it makes it safer on seed germination.
Okay.
So that's where we found this out in some trials at South Dakota State University. So over the years, we've done university tests, and like I said earlier, we added that to our application guide a few years ago.
And not just research taking place at the farm in California, but working with universities across the country, which works out well, because obviously there's different soil types, there's different terrains everywhere, so got to test it out.
And we don't want to just do everything at our own research station. We want to get the protocol, we want to do the things we need to do so we can take it to get that third-party accreditation with what we've done. And
touch base just a little bit on KRO, if you would.
KRO, we've been out on the market with it, 3 years now?
Yep,
it's a 0023% potassium and 8% sulfur. So it's got half the sulfur that KTS has in it, half the amount.
Okay.
But it mixes with UN32 and 1034O, so it makes a great starter fertilizer with 1034O. So it's we sell it, and it's kind of funny. It goes everywhere, since it's a new product. But it's kind of in spots, but those customers keep coming back. So, and starter fertilizers are expanding in certain areas. Like the state of Indiana, there's, I think, 50% of that corn crop gets a starter fertilizer. State of Illinois, it's not there yet.
Right.
So other places, it just depends on, their approach to early season starter fertilizers.
All right. Well, Patrick, last thoughts?
Sure. Well, as a company, we're even though this might be maybe the first time you're hearing about us tonight, we're out there in the field, and we're visible. We're at a lot of local and state farm shows.
That's right.
And actually, next week we will be at the Commodity Classic. So if any of the growers listening will be there, we invite you to stop by our booth. Would love to chat with you and answer any questions you have about fertilizer or nutrient management.
So there's farm shows, of course, coming up all across the countryside, so you can check them out at those farm shows, wherever they happen to be. But also, where can they locate products and information otherwise?
Sure. Again, talk to your local fertilizer dealer. Ask for our products by name, Crop Vitality products. If your dealer doesn't carry our products, look us up online on our website, www.cropvitality.com. And we'll be happy to connect you to a local fertilizer dealer where you can get our products.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to sit down and share the story. Now, again, they've been joining us here on set, Crop Vitality. They're going to be on location, of course, at the Commodity Classic. We appreciate you also joining us for Rural America Live. And good night from Rural America's most important network.